So I watched this documentary on BBC Two recently. It was about Lotte Reiniger, an unknown pioneer of early animation who allegedly created the multiplane camera and filming technique that would be adopted or stolen by the Disney studios. Have you heard of Lotte Reiniger?
I haven't heard of him specifically, but I have heard of the... her specifically, but I've heard of the multiplane camera. I studied that a little bit in my animation history class in school. But to be fair, it was only like they mentioned it once and then moved on to another subject.
Exactly. If you watch a documentary about Ab Iwerks, notoriously Disney's first colleague and friend, they will most likely credit the invention of the multiplane camera to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is rather appropriate that I have fumbled upon this documentary just as I was researching for the Van Beuren animation studios. Of course, the leitmotif here being somebody whose legacy and important role in history has been either usurped or overshadowed by the success of Disney. Alright, so as I mentioned many a times before, me and WhyBoy are finally going to do it. We're finally going to dive head first
Right.
into the Van Beuren Library, this forgotten film studios that existed in between 1920 and 1937 before it was unceremoniously booted out of history and also out of business. Not in that order, mind you. So in preparation for our venture of tonight, the first of many that is, I have written down a short introduction to properly prepare you to what this studio actually had to offer about what we are about to watch. So I'm going to read it to you now. It was the year of 1920 and the animated cartoon industry was just beginning to set its foundations. Felix the Cat was on his way to a decade-long stardom. The Fleischer brothers were already experimenting with mixed techniques and rotoscoping. A then unknown Walt Disney and his actually talented friend Ab Iwerks were yet to make a name for themselves with the Alice comedies, and clearly nothing else of note. And an advertising expert by the name of Amédée J. Van Beuren formed a partnership with then veteran cartoonist Paul Terry, which you might better know for the Terrytoons. Terry was originally a newspaper cartoonist for the San Francisco Call, for which he had been working since 1909. Inspired by Winsor McCay's Gertie the Dinosaur, 1914, he began to pursue a career in animation. He worked under the J.R. Bray Studios, where he created the character of Farmer Alfalfa, which he managed to retain the rights of, and then founded his own production company, the Paul Terry Productions, as it were, which he closed down to go fight in the Great War. Van Beuren was a salesman who became involved with the increasingly prolific and lucrative industry that Terry was already part of right around this time. Together they founded the Aesop's Fables Studios, later renamed Van Beuren Studios, in order to produce their first cartoon series, Aesop's Film Fables, which is exactly what we are going to discover tonight. As the title suggests, these short films were adaptations of Aesop's classic fables. The series premiered on May 13, 1921, with The Goose That Laid Golden Eggs. The early formula for these shorts was very loose in terms of fidelity to the source material, and displayed quote-unquote morals that seemingly had nothing to do with the cartoon itself. Terry staffer Manny Davis once remarked that the morals were, and I quote, funnier than the whole picture itself, end quote. Terry had this to say, quote, the fact that they're ambiguous is the thing that made them funny, end quote. Speaking of which, here are a couple of examples of the serious morals provided by the man himself. Quote, go around with a chip on your shoulder and someone will knock your block off. End quote. Quote, marriage is a good institution, but who wants to live in an institution? End quote. These are actual quotes from Paul Terry, by the way. These were the humble beginnings of a virtually unknown studio, which contribution to history was completely overshadowed by more successful practices of the time. Practices that ended up defining how we perceive cartoons and animation to this very day. I initially thought of writing down the entire history in one go, but then I decided to postpone that and essentially write down a different introduction depending on which series from these studios, which is a surprisingly prolific one, as it turned out, we are going to find out next. Now, when I tried to look for the goose that laid golden eggs under the Van Beuren banner, the only result I could find was that one Felix the Cat cartoon from the 1930s, which was originally my only exposure to Van Beuren when I was a child, and of course I did not know that. Because in the 1930s there was a brief attempt at rebooting the character of Felix through the Van Beuren shorts. It was largely unsuccessful, as you might imagine.
Right.
Right, so I could not find that particular short, the short that began it all, and unfortunately other silent films of the time produced by Van Beuren are either impossible to find or their quality is too low, which is a problem in its own right for archival purposes.
Yeah, I can.
So I just decided to randomly select a episode from the Aesop's film fables that was made in 1930.
Right.
Since it was right in the middle of their lifespan. I could have shown you their very first sound cartoon. In all honesty, that one deserves its own introduction, for various reasons that I shall uncover in due time. So for now, we are going to watch and comment on the short by the title A Toy Town Tale.
Right.
Aesop's Sound Fables. A Toy Town Tale by John Foster and Manny Davis. Hey, Manny Davis, I just quoted him.
And that one groundhog is just biting that leopard's tail for some reason.
There are plenty of quirky animation quirks.
Oh, those owls are cute.
Yes, they were cute up until
they opened their
started
mouths.
singing.
That is not a beak.
Indeed. Well, you can thank Van Beuren for the RV Bix design, I guess. Also, that hammer just clipped through space and time.
It's just like a video game.
You could say that hammer took a wrong turn to Albuquerque.
That toy soldier had just grown.
That's the moon, I think.
Yes, he's just getting all rascally.
Hey. Is this party town? Hey, yes, I'm so happy you drowned that cop. horrifying Jack in the Box.
Drummer with thick eyebrows.
So, I think you can surmise by context clues that this is a very loose adaptation of that story about the tin foil soldier? Which was not an Aesop fable, come to think of it.
Yeah.
It was written by Hans Christian Andersen, so unless I'm
I believe
mistaken...
it was.
So these are only 7 minutes long, but most of these are very much consumed by filler and pointlessness.
Yep. Yeah, mostly just motion to basically just impress the viewer.
Yes, this is something that Paul Terry seemingly never learned to fix, that is. Well, until the later aspects of his career, that is. So something interesting you might notice about the style of Van Beuren. The animation is cheap, for obvious reasons.
Of course.
So to save on... I'm sorry.
That was just gross.
Oh, jeez!
Yeah, that's even grosser.
She took a wrong turn to Uncanny Valley in Albuquerque.
So you took Betty Boop and just beat her with an ugly stick.
So as I was saying, due to budget reasons, there aren't many backgrounds used in this cartoon. Or, to be more specific, there isn't much in terms of a dynamic editing or animating. And most of the so-called action tends to take place all in one shot before they cut to another background and scene altogether.
Right.
Which, I think by accident, that gives this series a somewhat theatrical aesthetic.
Yeah.
Or style, if you will.
Because you more see that in theatrical animation where they just stick to scenes for a long period of time to basically just tell the story as best they can. That's some crazy eyes.
Yes. That's probably the most typical song you could sing at the time. Also, I just love how her mouth momentarily seemed to be animated into a different plane of existence.
Yeah.
Also, the model of the toy soldier seems to have changed slightly in between close-ups.
Oh, definitely.
I did not ask for nightmare fuel, thank you very much.
That creepy smile.
Yes, and that dead fish eyes. So yes. Uh-oh.
That pervy clown.
That clown is the bane of my existence, I tell you what. Oh, Captain, oh yes. So due to poor archival reasons, a lot of these shorts have been lost to time or they are otherwise difficult to find, and...
Yeah.
Is that a Jewish elephant?
Kill that elephant.
Ah. Well, this is getting suddenly very uncomfortable.
And 3 are dead.
Right, so another animation error. They changed the toy soldier position without a proper transition, and now the elephant is gone for no reason. Parts of the plot are missing altogether.
Exactly.
If you can call it a plot, that is.
Yeah, they're missing the part where they beat the elephant.
Ah, yes, so it turns out that the real hero of the story is this one shepherd you saw for 30 seconds and you forgot about.
Yeah. Yeah, he's determined.
That's not how you do the Charleston.
He's a papa monkey.
Monkey! Bad monkey. Monkey shine. So, the main conflict is resolved, the true love couple is together, and now it's a matter of wasting time up until the episode ends. Now, I am being slightly snarky and unfair here, but watching these cartoons is providing me with a unique perspective. Comeuppance.
Police brutality.
Oh, hold on! Oh, God! Winsor McKay sniffed too much cocaine!
Yeah, comparing that to a lot of the other sort of old cartoons that I've seen, that definitely feels a little bit more just a little bit all over the place. Because it only has so much story, so it just feels with walking animations.
This is giving us a unique perspective on things. Because, as I was about to say before the clown of terror from It, Pennywise, stole our souls, or whatever he is supposed to be doing. Studios like the Termite Terrace under Warner Bros., Disney, MGM, Universal and Paramount Studios are the ones that have been writing the history of animation, and as such, we are used to the idea that the quality of those shorts that they produced were representative of the era that they came out, but that's not entirely true. The truth is, those studios and the animations that they produced, they were the gold standards of the cartoon industry, the animated cartoon industry, but they were not representative of the average quality, because most other studios working in the field did not quite have the same budgets, which means they could not afford the same good, talented animators.
Yeah, right.
And because they were the less important, less widespread animation studios, they have been largely forgotten by history. The history of the Van Beuren studios is both indicative of the more reasonable average quality of cartoons at the time, and also what was the direction that the industry would eventually take, leaving behind smaller businesses. Again, like Van Beuren. So the idea that someone like Paul Terry managed to carve his own little neat space in the annals of animation history and not being completely forgotten is an impressive result, considering what the competition was.
Right.
And considering that his cartoons are not very good. If you jump skip a decade from now and you watch the Three Bears, somebody touch my spaghetti should tell you everything you need to know about Terry Toons. Really.
I still need to watch that cartoon.
And if you jump a decade even further to 1946, there is that one cartoon that we already commented on, starring Farmer Alfalfa, which has basically the same quality as the Three Bears. Meanwhile, the richer and more talented people working at the best studios, their style was constantly evolving, because they could afford it. So again, this is a good way to get a little bit of a perspective of what the true underbelly of the animation industry in the early days and so on actually was looking like.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why I wanted us to go into this journey to rediscover the legacy of Van Beuren and Paul Terry. Especially since I actually did not know anything about this studio up until very recently. What shall we watch next, you might be asking? Oh, I don't know. And by that I mean I completely know what we're going to watch next, when the chance arises, that is. And it has Something to do with a certain mouse. Intrigue.
Ooh.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Ha ha ha!